Hey everybody, in my introduction to social work class, my name is Ivy, and we are discussing some different concepts today in our Module 3, Verbal Reflections. So, in the first question, why is it important to have clear theoretical foundations for teaching communication skills? Well, this is something that I kind of thought of the metaphor of learning to drive. So, whenever we're learning how to drive, the driver's manual is like our technique. And then the theory behind the technique is actual experience, the learning, as well as the doing. And that's kind of like what theory is trying to explain. Also, these theories, they really help kind of like explain why the techniques we learn actually work. So, you know, we need to be studying like who it works with and why it works, which is the theory, because these things change with culture and time. Like whenever, for example, COVID-19, the way we communicate has changed a lot. People don't have as much verbal communication. They're talking more like, on social media, FaceTime, Skype, etc. So these are ways that so maybe a technique doesn't isn't as effective. We might need to change the technique. Social work is a fluid practice. It's something that we need to always be re-examining why we're doing what we're doing, because we're at the forefront of all of it. We need to, it's our career. We need to take an interest in if these techniques are still relevant, and theory is a good way to do that. So without the theory, obviously, the techniques would just stagnate. I don't think that they would necessarily be as effective over time, or they might even just be hard to implement in your practice if you don't know how to use them or why you use them. So that was question 1. Now question 2. So creating an environment where another person feels heard. This is so important. And the last time that I felt heard was probably in my therapist's office. And there's a reason therapists get paid. You pay a therapist to actively listen, such as the video described, because it's a rare thing, and it's also a difficult thing to learn how to really listen to somebody without thinking of what you're going to say next, or what's going to, without holding on to the ideas that you already had. And in this video, the video that we watched for the second question, they talk about how they can have their client empty the bucket. And that's whenever somebody explains and, just basically gets everything off of their chest that they need to say. And you just sit there and open yourself up and listen. And so this emptying the bucket thing, I think it goes both ways. I feel like your client empties the bucket by explaining what's going on with them, but then you as a therapist also, or a social worker in whichever case, you empty your bucket of preconceptions. So that could be like, any preconceived notions you have, any judgment, replacing the judgment with curiosity. It really changes not just how we approach our relationships with our clients, but how we approach our relationships, in our lives, in our personal relationships. If you think that you already know, that's like the opposite of being curious about something. And that seems pretty self-explanatory to me, why judgment can counteract learning, because unless we first admit that we don't know, we can't learn. So, and the third question, we're talking about, the different types of communication styles. I am most comfortable with written communication. Goes back into the COVID-19 thing, I think. A lot of us, kind of, including me, forgot how to communicate verbally as well and face-to-face. there's a lot of anxiety around face-to-face communications. And like, I find like, even when I try to talk to somebody in the grocery store, for example, it's a little more awkward and weird than it used to be, but I think we're going to get back into it, hopefully. But regardless, um, we could all use some work, I'm sure, in this area of the verbal and the nonverbal. They tie in together, and with me, I do have like the video was talking about, reflecting both like the verbal reflecting the nonverbal and them going together really well. Sometimes that's hard for me to do, because my face just like betrays me sometimes when I'm having a conversation. I have a thought, and you can read it all over my face. This is something I need to work on. Whenever I get this down, the verbal and the nonverbal balance, I think I'm going to be a much better communicator, and exercises like this won't be as awkward. So these are the questions that we had to do. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciated learning about how the theories tied into these techniques. And like, I have a list of like the different techniques and then the theories that correspond to that. And I think it's really fascinating to see this stuff tie into like not just social work, but like this goes into the psychology, approaches as well. So that's something to think about. And I hope everyone has a good night and stay safe, y'all.